Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
You know, I think the question everyone in Washington is wondering is, where did you learn to hammer a nail? And are you considering remedial courses for your colleagues?
I grew up doing it, yeah.
Yes. Are you considering remedial courses for your colleagues?
I grew up doing it when I was young. We're big deer hunters where I come from. You built your own tree stands in trees, hammers and nails. Now you can buy a tree stand. Cheaper than you can buy the lumber and the nails for. So I grew up doing it all my life.
Yeah,
that was kind of interesting.
It was quite a moment. Another thing you spent a lot of time constructing, though, is your Better Way document. And I'm wondering, are House Republicans, if you keep the majority, are you committed to moving forward on that?
Absolutely.
Regardless of who's president?
Look, thank you for cueing the prop. So this is 6 big solutions to big problems facing this country that we obviously believe is much easier to do with unified Republican government. But look at the issues we're trying to tackle. Number 1 is poverty. Let's go after the root causes of poverty. Let's define success by outcomes. Are we getting people out of poverty, not by input or just throwing money at problems? Evidence-based policymaking. I would like to think there's a lot of space for the kind of welfare reforms, evidence-based welfare reforms we're talking about here, no matter who is in what office. Clearly, we think it'd be easier if we had unified government. Rebuilding our military, that has been controversial, unfortunately, between the two parties. That one might be difficult. Regulatory reform, constitutional separation of powers, restoration. Those are things that we have pretty profound disagreements with progressives. Obamacare is imploding. It's in what actuaries call a death spiral. We propose a very comprehensive alternative, along with the entitlement reforms that are necessary to prevent a debt crisis in the future. That's going to have to be dealt with no matter what, just because the law is imploding. And then tax reform. That's the 6th of this. Tax reform, again, inevitable, must have to happen because of just the fact that we are losing our competitiveness so quickly in this country. More and more American companies are either inverting or getting bought by foreign companies, and we're losing our homegrown businesses.
Let's walk through those priorities. Start with health care. Obamacare certainly has lots of problems, rising premiums. On the other hand, census reported the other day, only 9.1% of Americans are uninsured, one of the lowest numbers ever. Would you say as a matter of principle that whatever you replace it with should have to meet the test of reducing the number of Americans, keeping the number of Americans without insurance down to that level?
I think it should be, we should always have a plan that helps people who are uninsured get health insurance, and there are far better ways. Here, I'll say it this way. We can have a system in this country where everyone has access to affordable health insurance, including people with pre-existing conditions, obviously for people who are low income, without having a costly government takeover that cranks up premiums, deductibles, and denies choices. I think Kaiser just put out a study that says about 31% of our nation's counties only offer one plan. Another 30%, something like 2 plans. So we're going from an oligopoly to a monopoly, and these are basically public utilities where people are getting no choices and they're getting such high premium increases. The law is imploding. United just pulled out. Aetna just pulled out. The not-for-profits are staying, but they're going to start having huge losses.
Should any alternative have to meet the standard of reducing the number of uninsured?
Any alternative should provide universal access to affordable health insurance. There are going to be people in this country that, for one reason or another, will choose not to have health insurance. Your son, who's an Army Ranger, who's in business school, probably has an invincibility complex. He may not choose to have health insurance. So there are going to be those people, but for those who want it and need it, clearly we can have a system that can do that. And by the way, that is what we propose. This provides universal access to affordable health insurance.
Let me ask you on the tax side, because if you go back over the last 30 years or so, Reagan cut taxes, got big job growth, 16 million over 8 years.
Right.
Bill Clinton raised taxes, got even more job growth, 22 million. Hold on.
Cut capital gains taxes.
22 million over 8 years, raised income taxes. George W. Bush cut taxes, only 1.3 million jobs over 8 years. President Obama is now past 11 million jobs after raising taxes. What is there in that record that gives you confidence that tax cuts are the key lever to accelerate job creation and economic growth?
We are in the 21st century. That was all 20th century. The
U.S. Obama's this century. Obama's this century. Obama raised taxes and may have 10 times as many jobs created
let me explain what I say.
Terms as Bush after Bush cut taxes.
And we're averaging about, what, 1 to 2% growth, flat wages, anemic growth, probably a recession around the corner. What I mean when I say we're in the 21st century, this economy is so global, so interconnected, capital is so mobile. In the 20th century, America was out there in the lead, could dominate. That is not the case anymore. We have to be competitive. overseas, which where I come from means Lake Superior.
Yeah.
You know, the Canadians, they tax all their businesses at 15%. Ireland's 12.5%. England's going at 18%. China's at 25%. Our corporations are taxed at 35%. That's the highest in the industrialized world. Our successful small businesses, we call them pass-throughs, like subchapter S corporations, their top tax rate's 44.6%. Here's the point I'm trying to make, Ron, is if we keep taxing our businesses at so much higher tax rates than our foreign competitors tax theirs, we will lose in global competition. More to the point, companies are going overseas and repatriating overseas because of taxes. I met with one big company, I won't name the company, a huge business in Minnesota, who became a foreign company so that they could take their overseas money and reinvest back in this country. This is crazy. So the point I'm trying to make is, in the 21st century, you can't just think you can tax and tax and tax and there'll be no international consequences. We've got to make our tax code more competitive so that it pays to stay in American business, so that it makes sense to manufacture in America, so that it makes sense to have your headquarters in America.
Let me ask you about another area.
That to me is it's inevitable that we have to address that.
Let me ask you another area of focus, poverty. I mean, you spend a lot of time going into communities where Republicans don't usually go, and you have said, that Republicans face obviously hurdles in those places. What have you learned about the way Republicans are perceived, and what will it take to change those perceptions?
Show up, show up, show up. Listen, listen, listen. You got 2 ears, 1 mouth. Use it in that proportion. And then we need to do that a little bit better. And what I've learned is there are incredible poverty fighters in communities who are doing amazing things. Don't try to displace them. Tell them, I'm here to tell you what to do. Help them, support them, give them oxygen, space, help them replicate. Violence-free zone. It's a thing we created in Milwaukee. Pulaski High School is a high school that people in Milwaukee know it. They had 14 gangs at Pulaski. This was not a safe place to have your kid go to school. We created this mentor program where former gang members, kids who were down and out and then get redeemed, became mentors 24/7, and they helped get these kids on the right path, avoiding mistakes. They had credibility, 0 gangs. Graduation rates are up, test scores are up. There's a one idea. So what are we doing? We're cross-pollinating, and we're bringing this idea to Kenosha, to Racine. It's going on in Dallas. It's going on all around the country. These are homegrown solutions we need to get behind. The way I say this is private sector, public sector, charitable sector, for-profit sector, they're not working together right now in the same direction, in tandem with one another. We need to do that so that we're all kind of pushing and pulling, going after root causes of poverty, and that to me is what Republicans can offer. Disruption into this poverty industrial complex, disruption into the status quo that has failed us, so that we can actually have reforms that measure success based on outcomes and results.
The criticism you hear, though, is that the budget priorities don't always match up. The argument is that your budget priorities don't match up with your language and your rhetoric. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities says 62% of the cuts over 10 years in the Republican budget would focus on programs for low and moderate income families. Does that undermine your claim for outreach?
I don't find them as a very credible budget source. Just no pun intended here. I just think that the CFPB they're fairly left of center, so we dispute their assessment, their numbers. This, to me, is not a budget-cutting exercise. This is a life-saving exercise, and what will happen is, if we are successful at getting a person from welfare to work, then there will be budget savings at the end of the day because of that. But that's how the budget savings ought to be achieved. Let me say it this way. We've got a poverty trap where you stack up lots of different benefits for a person so that it pays not to work. If you're a single mom, you get about 24 grand in benefits, you have 2 kids, you get offered a job, or you're in a job, you get offered a raise, you're going to lose like 80 cents on the dollar. You'll lose your child care benefits, these cliffs. And so they basically disincentivize people to move up and out of poverty. What we're proposing is to change all of that, taper those benefits, and customize welfare benefits to a person's particular needs with important incentives. You got to work. Benefits are conditional. Or go to school, get training, get the soft skills, then the hard skills. The point is, if we can customize benefits to get people from where they are to where they need to be, then there will be plenty of savings at the end of the day. At the front end, It shouldn't be about saving money. At the back end, it will be about getting people up and out of poverty, and there will be savings. That's the way we see it.
Jack Kemp was someone you work with and admired. He was someone
He was my mentor.
He was someone I covered and admired, and I spent a few days with him in 1994 as the Republicans were driving toward their first majority in 40 years. And he felt somewhat alienated from the direction of the party, and he said to me one day on this trip, we can't be just the party of little government and big prisons.
Yeah.
You might update that now to be the party of little government and big walls. Do you feel that he's right?
I'm one of the people who are pushing for criminal justice reform. I think both parties, Democrats and Republicans, Bill Clinton signed these into law. We sort of overcompensated. We went a little too far. Now that we've learned that there are better methods of incarceration, better methods of getting people on the right path, that we want to institutionalize redemption. And so those are things that many of us on a bipartisan basis are working on.
Why did it derail, though? Why, it looked promising earlier this year. Why is it not
We're
happening?
still on track. We're actually working. We got out
You
of
think
the
it could happen
in the
this
House.
year?
We got 6 bills out of the Judiciary Committee, so we're still working on it.
You think working on it for this year?
Yeah.
Okay. The polls have shown this year in the Republican primaries, that in virtually every state, except for Alabama and Mississippi, every other state with an exit poll, a majority of Republican primary voters supported some kind of legal status for undocumented immigrants here in the U.S. Is it possible for a Republican House to move forward on that in 2017 for a comprehensive plan that would include some legal status?
Well, the way I would say this is, I've written very extensively about this, and you probably know my position on this issue. I think there is a way to deal with the undocumented population that doesn't involve mass deportation, that doesn't involve an amnesty, that gets a person a way to earn their right to a work permit. But you've got to start with security. You have to. The problem so many people have is there's no faith or confidence that we'll actually secure our border, that we'll actually have interior security, and so that the feeling is we'll do something on the legal side, but we won't secure our border, and then we'll be in the same problem 10 years down the road.
And you think you can bring your Republican colleagues in the House along to a package that
what I
includes
don't
that?
think works is a big comprehensive bill. Those always collapse under their own weight. I think that's the wrong way to go. I think you stage reforms, and they must begin with the confidence-building exercise that is critical for national security. It's in our national security agenda: secure the border, interior enforcement. In the day and age of heroin coming into our high schools and ISIS trying to penetrate our southern border, you've got to deal with this. And when you deal with that, and if we deal with that, and we do it in a way that gives people the sense that we are actually securing our country, then I think attitudes will change across the country, where people then are willing to embrace fixing our broken immigration system. Now, many of us have a lot of ideas on how to fix that. It's clear the system's broken. It's got to be addressed, but not some big bill that collapses under its own weight.
Speaking of Mexico, the presidential candidate you have endorsed, Donald Trump, who today is neck and neck in the polls and within 6 weeks might be elected president, he has said that he intends to immediately renegotiate the terms of NAFTA to get a better deal for our workers, and if he does not succeed, he would withdraw from NAFTA. Would you help him, as Speaker of the House, would you help him try to achieve withdrawing from NAFTA?
I don't want to get into hypotheticals.
No, it's not hypothetical. I mean, in 6 weeks, this person you've endorsed could be president. So if Donald Trump is president and wants to withdraw from NAFTA, would you help him achieve that?
Let me say this. If we can make this agreement, first of all, it's pretty old. It was 1993 or 4 when this was done, so there are things we can do to upgrade and improve. I think on national energy policy, there's clearly room for growth and improvement between Canada, Mexico, and NAFTA. I think we should have a North American energy bloc that could just dominate the world. So I do think that there are areas for clear improvement in NAFTA. Let's work on improving it and not talk about withdrawing it. Let's work on improving it. And by the way, as you know, I wrote the Trade Promotion Authority law so that we can go out and get trade agreements. It's really important that we open up export markets for ourselves. 95% of the world's consumers live in the other countries, not this country, so we have to have trade. The key is we have good, effective trade agreements. The last point I would say is we're in the midst of writing the rules of the global economy. They'll be written by someone, somebody, some country. I say it's us and not others.
From the start of your career here in Washington, one of your most consistent causes has been entitlement reform. And the budget and the Better Way reaffirm the goal of converting Medicare into a premium support structure.
That's right.
Your presidential nominee has said repeatedly, we're not going to cut your Social Security and we're not cutting your Medicare. Regardless of who is elected in 2016, in November, will you continue to push to
Absolutely.
transfer?
Look,
so regardless, whether
regardless, we're pushing for this. And by the way, it doesn't cut Medicare.
Right.
You need to know that Medicare is on its way to insolvency. It is the biggest hole coming in the budget And so the government right now is making promises to people that it knows it cannot keep. What we're proposing is a system that the Congressional Budget Office tells us is the most effective way to save money and solvency for the program, for beneficiaries and for taxpayers. And our programs, our reforms, don't apply to current seniors. They apply to our generation prospectively. If you're in and near retirement, nothing changes. We can keep doing that. We can keep that promise if we fix this soon. If we blow another presidency and don't fix these entitlement problems, and then get around to it after the boomers are well into retirement, it will be ugly reforms that pull the rug out from under people after they've retired in order to stave off a debt crisis spurred by the bond markets. This is what we're trying to avoid happening. Do it on our terms, and we think this will make Medicare better, give people more choices.
Two more quick questions on how your agenda may align with the next president. Hillary Clinton has called for spending $275 billion on infrastructure, roads, bridges, airports. Earlier this year, Donald Trump said her numbers are a fraction of what we're talking about. We need much more money than that to rebuild our infrastructure. Well, I would say at least double her numbers, and you're really going to need more than that. So would you help a President Donald Trump pass a $550 billion or more infrastructure program? Would that be something that you would help him achieve?
That's not in the Better Way
That's
agenda.
not in the Better Way agenda?
Just so you know, we just passed the biggest highway bill since the mid-1990s.
Right.
Last night we passed the Water Resources Bill, which is infrastructure for water projects, Army Corps of Engineer projects. So this Congress is actually producing. The most comprehensive rewrite of K-12 education we passed. The rewrite of our customs laws we passed. A long-term highway and mass transit bill we passed. So we're getting things done, and yes, we have infrastructure problems. The real deal here on that is gas taxes aren't cutting it anymore. We've got to figure out a different way of financing
it. One other area that has not received a lot of attention, but in his Arizona speech, Donald Trump said we should have a future test for the amount of legal immigrants we let into the country, and that should be limited so that the share of the total population that is born abroad only stays at an historical average, which the historical average is about 10%. It's now 14%, going up to 18%. He wants to limit future legal immigration by a test of how much of the country is born abroad.
I've never even heard that.
I didn't even know that. It's in the speech. It's in the policy paper. Is that something you would? What would you think about limiting immigration so that we maintain a kind of certain population balance?
I've never looked at it like that. What I've always believed is you need to retool the legal system so that it fits the economy's needs. Keep nuclear families intact, but transition our legal system so that visas are given to what are needed for the economy. Do we have a shortage of dairy workers in western Wisconsin? Yes, we do. Do we have a shortage of high-tech Silicon Valley software engineers? Boomers are retiring. We're going to need medical professions. We're going to need nurses and doctors. So even if we succeed in item number one here, get every able-bodied person out of welfare to work. There's 94 million people who are able-bodied adults that aren't in the workforce. Some by choice, many not. Even if we get everybody off of welfare into work, which is fight poverty effectively, we're still going to have population needs because of demographics in this country. A 90% increase in the retirement population, but only a 19% increase in the worker population.
So we are going to need legal immigrants.
So we're going to need people. We're going to need legal immigrants. And that means, in my mind, visas ought to be given based upon your contribution to society, your skill set that is needed in our economy that is not being filled by Americans.
Before they give us the hook, as you've listened this year, have you heard anything that you could work with Hillary Clinton on if she's elected president?
Well, how much time you got?
We're done. We're done. We're done.
Look, we'll work with whoever wins whatever office. Obviously, I think with a unified Republican government, we can get so much more done. I'm tired of divided government. It doesn't work very well. We're just at loggerheads. We've gotten some good things done, but the big things, poverty, the debt crisis, the economy, healthcare, these things are stuck in divided government, and that's why we think a unified Republican government's the way to go.
Mr. Speaker, keep hammering.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
You bet. Nice to see you.